Aloha Friday, everybody. Welcome to the show. I am Enrique, and I'm so happy that you are with us today. If you are tuning in, either way, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Parade Deck, let me know where you're coming in from, and we would love to chat in the comment section with you as we progress in today's show. Now, today, I will be speaking with Reena Friedman Watts about getting seen, heard, and recognized. Now, I'm waiting on Reena to show up, so I'm going to kind of ad lib it today until she gets into the studio. But Aloha Friday, everybody. Thank you for joining us today as we finish out this weekend or this week. But let me bring in Reena. She is hot and heavy, coming in hot.
Coming in hot.
Hey, Reena, nice to have you on Aloha Friday Live. I was just prepping the stage for you.
I love it. Good energy. TGIF.
So I was just letting everybody know we're going to be speaking about getting seen, heard, and recognized, something that you do so well. I've made so many great connections from your, hey, Enrique, check this person out. Go talk to this person. And one of the reasons, and for those of you that are listening and have been listening over the last 4 years as we've been doing Aloha Friday Live, you know that we have a podcast called Developing the Leader Within podcast. DTLW has been around. It was the actual first show that we did, but I connected with Reena several years ago now, and it's amazing that that time has flown by like it has. But she has introduced me to so many people. One of them is the actual, uh, owner and director and operating guy of what we call Headliner, right? Headliner app. If you've ever been to Podfest, you know they're always there. It is the platform that I use to bring my shorts and things like that. And we connected, and in a conversation, they end up partnering with our show, and it is all because of this young lady right here. She made that connection, and Arena. I'll give you a chance here to introduce a little bit about you, but I just want to give you those kudos and props because in that recognition, because sometimes we make those connections and we don't hear back from folks. So here on the air, folks, it was because of Reena. So Reena, take some time and tell us a little bit about you, and we'll get into this whole thing about being seen, heard, and recognized.
I am so happy, first of all, that worked out. And I love the Headliner app. They have so many amazing new features. And there's a lot of capabilities that they offer that are free. Like they will transcribe your podcast, they give you podcast title suggestions, they give you suggestions of what you can post on LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, just from dragging over your RSS feed or your MP3 into Eddie by Headliner. So if you are a podcaster and you are not using Headliner, it's not just for audiograms anymore. They are turning your audio into audience, and I love Headliner. I am so glad that worked out for you.
Yeah, no, I love them too. So
Yeah, a little bit about me. Last time we connected, we were talking about leadership and when you work for a manager that doesn't necessarily want to be a manager, what kind of leadership is that? And I have worked for managers who didn't want to be managers. And I think that's why I became an entrepreneur, because after working for managers like that, you're like, wow, I need to grow as a person and I need to be able to stand on my own 2 feet, and I want to put my own creativity into the world. And so, I got my start at the Jerry Springer Show about 20 years ago, where I learned a lot of things like managing a budget and casting people and how to help people tell their story. And then I moved out to LA and kind of worked in the reality TV show world for really the beginning of my career. And I loved that. That lit me up. And I tried so many different positions in that realm, from being a field interviewer and a post-production supervisor and even an executive assistant at a special effects animation company. And I kind of found all of these little things in the production world that I loved. And then I ended up working for some podcasters and helped them put on events and get sponsorships for their events. And then I decided to start a podcast of my own. And I've been doing that now for about 4 years. I had you on about 2 years ago already. It's so crazy. And then from that, I've now, been able to interview people in person and put on my own podcaster meetups and help people tell their story. And I just love everything that I'm up to now. And I'm so glad that we're still in touch.
Yes, it's been a blessing, and thank you for having me on your show. I cannot forget the name of your show. I'm telling you, and it's one that I love how you integrated your dad into that. It's seldom that podcasters bring in family in some way, shape, or form. But I love the way you did it. So I want you to talk about Better Call Daddy, because it is one of the shows that I have just absolutely loved to be on. And then the conversation after, hey, my dad's not here today, but what would you say? And then, that kept on, and it has been beautiful ever since. And Rocky, thank you for being with us. I believe we both know Rocky and Raquel Flores. So I
Aw,
will let you talk about Better Call Daddy, because I love that.
thank you. Yeah. So that really started because, like I said, I got my start in the talk show industry and I used to book wild and crazy stories. And I kind of have a love for that. And I've kept in touch with, Judge Alex and Jerry Springer and some of the nannies from Nanny 911. And I was like, I feel like people would find some of those contacts to be interesting. And so now I've had them on my own podcast and I wanted to share those stories with my dad. And then instead of Jerry Springer giving the final thought at the end of every episode, I have my dad do that because he's my number one fan, my biggest supporter. And I also felt like the family element is so needed in today's world. I wanted to add his intergenerational perspective on the end of every episode because I look to him for mentorship. I look to him for leadership. He gives me great advice in my own business and my own life. I feel like he's a solid guy. He's been married. I think he just celebrated like 46 years of marriage. And I've seen him take care of his own parents, and his own children are still calling him every day. And so yeah, I was like, I feel like people could, be like a fly on the wall for that relationship. If they don't have that relationship with their dad, they can kind of tap into it. If they do have that relationship with their dad, they'll relate to it. And it's been a lot of special time with my dad. We've done like 370 episodes together, and it's not very often where you're in your 40s and you have a project to work on with a parent. I actually encourage people, like if you've never interviewed a parent or you've never interviewed a grandparent or you've never really kind of dug into more of like where you came from, you should do that. I love when people reach out to me and they're like, "Hey, I interviewed my dad or I brought my dad on to intro you because we collaborated." I mean, that's my most favorite thing. And so I'm trying to encourage that, you know, capture these relationships while you can. And technology has really leveled the playing field where you can just put on some Apple earbuds on your 95-year-old grandmother. I did that. And I reminded her of her favorite stories that she told me. And I got her to tell me in her own words. And now she loves listening to that and can't even tell that story in the same way 2 years later. So interview a family member. That's the message.
Absolutely. And you just reminded me, when my very first Aloha Friday live was my daughter.
I love
If
that.
you go back all the way back to the very beginning, my very first interview was my daughter.
Oh my
And
God.
I did that intentionally, obviously, because I'm a believer that where you sow your first seed, that's where the rest of your trajectory will go. I wanted to sow it back into my family, right? And so she was my first one. Outside of that, she is very bright, and so I knew that she would make a great person to talk about leadership, because at the time she was struggling with some leadership challenges at her job, and I wanted to exploit and expose the viewpoint of the employee, right? hey, you guys got a job, you got to get paid, but this is the ramifications of your poor leadership. And she was able to express all the pains and all the angst and all those, severe anxiety and all this thing that came from pressure from people that should have never even been there, right? So,
I
but
love that.
so
And
it was
how lucky is she that she has a dad that, understands leadership, and it must break your heart to see your kid go through those lessons.
it did it did because I went through them. And it's
Mhm.
so if your children are going through something that you've never been through, then you can kind of guide them the best you can. But when you went through that, it's almost like this thing is repeating itself and it hurts even more, right?
Like a double trigger.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you how to deal with it, but then I'm gonna show up on Monday. So it's one of those things. But yeah, I really enjoyed having her on, and that was the first one. And here we are. Good Lord, 4 years later, right? Because you started yours. I started mine February 2000. 98, no, 2020, right? So 2020, right before the pandemic just, broke the world.
Really right
Yeah,
before.
right before, just the month before. And it was because I lost my job. But so we've been in this podcast community for about the same time. Uh, but I think that you have done something that I have not done. That's just not my lane, right? You have taken your experience from the production, the setup of these shows, Jerry Springer, LA. You've combined all of that plus this wonderful podcast you have to not only solidify your footing, right, in the podcast community, but to make it accessible and make it a point where folks can reap your rewards. And that's what I love about what you do, Reena. It is very apparent
Aw.
that you are interested in people's blessing, success, because that's how you operate. And so I see that from afar. We get to watch these things. If you watch anybody, you get to watch these things, and you're like, man, that is what it is all about.
It's
Not
true.
only getting to your success, which you have and you are, but pulling somebody, and in your case, it's not just a somebody, it's a severals of somebody's, all the way through. Now you mentioned meetups, and obviously that's one way. But what made you think of this journey for yourself in that capacity? Because it's easy to get into all the accolades and success and just basking it, right? So what was it that made you think of, hey, I can't go at this all by myself?
So I was new to moving to Texas, and when you're new to a place and trying to find your people, you go to different meetups yourself. The first one I went to was at the University of Houston, and it was hosted by Nick Gray and Tom Vaughn. Nick Gray wrote a book called The 2 Hour Cocktail Party. He had actually reached out to me to be on my podcast, sent me a copy of his book. I ended up following him on social, but never having him on. And then when we moved to Texas, I saw in his status on Instagram that he was hosting one of these 2 hour cocktail parties. So I reached out to him and was like, hey, can me and my husband come? And we ended up going and then connecting with some people locally. Tom Vaughn teaches screenwriting at the University of Houston, and he had read the book as well. I ended up also having him on. And then at that event, I connected to financial advisors who were formerly actresses and people that owned a theater in town. I interviewed the theater manager. So it's just finding your people and seeing how your gifts complement their gifts. But the first one I went to was, actresses and podcasters and local creators. And I love all of those people. Those are totally my people. Like, I went to a youth performing arts school for high school. So I love comedians and writers and film people. And yeah, like, what are you working on? How can I be a part of that? I even connected with a guy who came to my podcaster meetup that I ended up hosting. And he's like, I'm working on a horror movie. I was like, hey, do you need a script supervisor? I've done that. Do you need an assistant editor? I've done that. Do you need an assistant camera? Do you need somebody to monitor the audio levels? Like, what are you missing? How can I fit in? So a lot of my life has just been that. It's like finding things that you enjoy doing and then finding other people that are working on projects that might need an extra hand and seeing if there's any opportunities or crossover there. But yeah, I went to one meetup at the University of Houston, and then I went to another event in town called Cup of Joey, which I really love too. It's this co-working space here in Houston. He does them at a bunch of different co-working spaces, and you lead with your why. So you can't say what you do, but like what gets you out of bed in the morning, like what lights you up. So me, I love connecting with people. I love interviewing people. I love helping people tell their stories. And I lead with that. Like, that literally lights me up. And so at one of these Cup of Joey events, I met Mozzie Kigo Body. I met his brother, and I told him I love interviewing inspirational fathers, daddy's girls, anybody with a little daddy drama. And he was like, oh, my brother is an inspirational father. He started a nonprofit because his son has a rare form of muscular dystrophy. You should interview him. And then he offered to sponsor it. I was like, amazing. So we ended up renting a studio, doing it in person. And then he came to my podcaster meetup that I threw myself. And I said, hey, I know this event is free, but if you want to give to his nonprofit, I love his story. So I'm just constantly like doing things that I love doing that lights me up, and seeing who my people are at those events and gathering those people and then figuring out how we can either work together or deepen the relationship.
And I love all of that you said. But let me tell you, I listen intently. You said something that just, it tugged at my heart. What are you missing, and how can I fit in? Folks, if you don't get nothing else out of this hour together, what are you missing? When you lead the conversation with what a person is missing, it is a game changer for the entire conversation. You didn't say, hey, I do this. Where can you use me? What are you missing? And where can I fit in? Folks, I'm going to make a t-shirt. I'm telling you, because that is the essence of relationship. I remember not so long ago, I was just, sitting around in my quietness, right? You already know me in the garden, right? Me in the garden. And I'm out there in my quietness, and I heard this, and you already know that I'm faith-based. So faith, I created you for relationship. And I'm like, why are you telling me? Yeah, I know people. No, that in my life, because I was in the military and I was used to being away without family, I truly got disconnected. It was easy for me to see you and be happy, and not see you and be just as happy, right?
Wow.
And so, and I grew, 26 years in the military. That's not easy to just drop off. And so now I'm a civilian, still acting the same way. And so, now I got the opportunity to meet family, be with family, get together with people, and I used to be, they called me at one time the mayor of Honolulu because I was everywhere at all times, without being God, right? And it just, that's how I moved, networking and moving this and connecting and all that. Somehow that went away. And so I was reminded uh, ever so gently, that in life, if you cannot have and foster and nurture relationships, you are truly going against the essence of why God made us. And as a believer, I was like, oh my goodness, no, not me. I'm doing that. As you talk about how you address these conversations, right? That's where it's at.
Oh, I need that too.
It's just amazing. And so I love that you mentioned that, because maybe the listener may, I see people on LinkedIn, I see people on YouTube. Maybe that is what you've been missing. You've been treating relationships as transactional versus as an investment, and now you're you're alone, and or your people have dwindled, or you're not as happy in relationships as before. Lead with the, what are you missing and how can I fit in? I'm telling you, that will make a world of a difference.
Thank you for picking up on that. Yeah, I was re-listening to an episode yesterday of Manis Friedman. He's one of the most popular rabbis on YouTube, actually, and he was speaking yesterday in Los Angeles, and I ended up connecting with one of the sponsors of the event through a Facebook group that I was in of podcasters, and he said a quote, "What is worse than being what is worse than loneliness? Being alone." And that really hit me. And I was thinking about that, and really the way to fix that is to deepen the relationships. Like, stop collecting people, but see who you're already connected to that you love and that are your people and that you found, and just check in on them. It can be simple, like voice notes. I have people that literally send me like little voice notes, or they'll see a quote and the quote will make them think of me, and they send those to me, and that brightens my day. So I really try to do that for people. If I see a motivational quote, like if it was about gardening, I would send it to you, or if it was
And
about
you have.
leadership, or lessons from the garden. I've connected anytime somebody like reaches out to me and they're like, I have a green thumb, or I'm super into like thinking in my garden. I'm like, immediately I think of you. And then I have that with other people too. Like, there's a girl, Mel McSherry, and I know that she's super into human design. So anytime somebody brings up human design, I'm like, you need to know her. And it's funny that you mentioned the lesson about, your daughter struggling in the workplace. I actually saw Kristen Sherry, who's very active on LinkedIn, and she's also been on my podcast. She had that same situation with one of her kids, and she was like, God, I've written books you know, on the workplace and on leadership and all these things. And when it happens to your kid, boy, is it like a sucker punch. You can try to teach them these things, but some of these lessons they have to learn. And luckily they can have, parents that are going to show up for them. But it is interesting that when you're tested with these things, how are you going to guide your own children through them?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, because you try to remove the emotion, the immediate emotion. It's like fire goes up, and you're like, who did it, and where do I see them, right?
Whew.
And especially with your kids. But and what we tried to do is, which as you was talking, I was just like, oh my goodness. So we try to rear and educate our kids to a situation, right? Hey, this, you may see this, you may come across this, but preparing for something and actually being there when it happens is two different things. In the military, we say no plan survives first contact. No plan, and we plan a lot,
Wow.
survives first contact, because the act is individual to that person's experience, and you can't plan for that. So those leaders that come at your kids at times, or your family members, that's an individual that has a certain level of experience, and no one can plan for that. And so what you try to do, we've been trying to help them plan for an event, um, and we should always do that, but we have to look at it from the perspective of, and oh, by the way, this may fail. So what's next? What are you going to do next? Because, and so that taking into account the failure part is something that we don't often do. And as you were saying, and I'm thinking, okay, well, we need to modify that one. But yeah, so let's get to getting seen. Getting seen, right? We are both active on LinkedIn, social media, events, going to this, connecting people. I was just having a conversation about a outlier project meetup in Orlando.
Ooh,
One, we're having one in Ocala, so I'm going to get both of those in. But so activity, you could be an active participant in activity, but a lot of times, even if you go to these events, you cannot be seen. And there is like a fine line between getting seen, getting heard, and then getting recognized. But how do you position people to get seen?
that's a great question. And as you were even leading up to that, I was thinking to myself, yeah, you can go to all of these events and you can network with all of these people, but you got to put on your own show. You got to create your own podcast. You got to create your own blog. You can guest on people's, and I think that that's a really good way of getting started and figuring out how to solidify your story. But nobody can tell your story like you. Nobody can create your show like you. Nobody can give your speech like you. Ultimately, and I had to do this myself, you have to step into the spotlight and do your thing. So, I think that's what it boils down to.
And I just put that question in: how do you go about being seen? Everybody has a way, everybody has a tactic, everybody has a strategy, uh, and you just have to ensure that number one is for the right reason, right? A lot,
Intention. Oh,
yeah, the
yeah.
intention. Because I tell you
Woo!
what, you'll sniff that out. If I'm in a room, I can sniff out, intent for self. I
The
can
sales folks immediately.
immediately, and I'm like, what? And it happens to us on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
I wish I had a room full of folk right now and say with a show of hands, right? Hey, I saw your profile. Would love to connect. And I'm like, there is not much context in that.
Yeah.
Not much
Looks
context.
like
But
we have similar friends and connections.
yeah,
Let's connect.
but you know what? Let's give them the benefit of doubt. And
Right.
as I'm pressing, connect, I'm feeling this resistance on my finger. And I'm like, okay, all right, let's hope not of what I think this is all about. And sure enough, seconds. And I mean, they must have been at the, at the
They're like,
keyboard,
the
at the
moment you hit
keyboard.
connect,
Boom. It's like you cannot type fast enough.
it's a
There's no way,
sequence.
right? It's a whoop. And I'm like, there we go. All right, block, delete. I'm going through
Archive.
my
Yeah.
ritual, my ritual, block, delete, never see again. Yeah, and I hate to do that because I'm a lover of people, and I know the spectrum of good, and I also know the spectrum of bad. But even in between, I am a receiver of grace and mercy, and so I cannot, with a clear conscience, not also give that, right? And so that's my first go-to. Now, obviously, you also have to, once something's violent, you have to protect yourself. So then, go ahead and do what you got to do. I do block and delete. And it's simple to do, just for the sake of time. But when, you're in those events and you have obviously picked up on the intent. Hopefully it's not everybody that's like that. There's going to be some people, right? You met that gentleman had a book, or wrote a story, had an interesting story, and then you connected them, and then all of a sudden now you're at the studio. Yeah, that
I've
is.
had that actually happen multiple times. Like the very first event I went to was a Pod Houston event, and it was, I think they had a couple speakers, and I met this girl, Alicia. She came up to me. She had a show at the time called Vibes by Alicia. Now it's called the Senora podcast. And she told me that she wrote a book with her dad and that it was a bilingual book. And I was like, oh my God, Daddy's Girls Unite. And then she was like, I have a studio, and it was audio only, but we've now collaborated 4 times. So we did an episode on what it's like to be a daddy's girl. Then we have collaborated where we interviewed a managing director of a local theater together. And then we interviewed Shirley Yu, who was in town sponsoring PlantCon. PlantCon was a first of its kind. It was an entire convention about people that were into gardening and plants. And I had never seen that or knew that the plant community was so extensive. And so, yeah, we brought her in to talk about that. And then I got to see her booth that she had set up. And then I filmed the behind the scenes of Shirley speaking. And that was such a blast. And she and I connected Shirley on Twitter because she knew that I like to interview daddy's girls, and her father were both collectors. And when they moved from China to the US, he named himself Elvis and he named her Shirley. So he was a collector of Elvis memorabilia, and she collects all things with the name of Shirley, like Shirley Temple. And I thought that that was like a fun daddy story, and it was very unique. And then, yeah, I got to meet her in person. And me and Alicia, who both are podcasters, we kind of got to collaborate on, what she would ask, what I would ask, and it was fun doing it in person. And then I got to go to this PlantCon convention, which I didn't even know was happening in Houston. So it was just a mix of all of the things that I love doing, going to trade shows, interviewing people live, connecting with people off of social media, and then making some content out of it.
I love it. Now, getting seen can, because you just did a list of things that you do, right? Getting seen can become almost an obligation. Sometimes it's fun and you could do it and just fine, but getting seen, it almost can be an obligation, because you almost feel like, if I don't make this, and if I don't make that, and if I don't make this, oh, how many opportunities am I going to miss? Who am I not going to meet? Where am I going? How can I get my show? How can I, so getting seen is an active thing. But what would you suggest for people that are in that position now? They have something, they feel they have something, they know they want it, eyeballs on it, they want to be at least viewed, right? Um, what would you suggest for them to do in order to get this stage in order?
That is a great question. And as you asked me that, I was thinking about Doctora Sandra Montgomery. So she was brought by somebody that I had met at a Cup of Joey event to my podcaster meetup that was sponsored by Riverside. She came to the event, and one of the questions that I asked everyone in the group, we went around in a circle kind of as an icebreaker. I said, do you want to be a guest on a podcast? Do you have a podcast? Or do you want to start one? And she said, I want to be a guest on a podcast. And I was like, well, hey, I'm working the media booth at the Offshore Technology Conference for the next 4 days. And she's like, oh, I'm like an hour away. She literally drove in the next day, waited until I was done interviewing someone else for the opportunity to be on camera and use their mics and get a half-hour segment. And so I think if you want to be seen, that you have to go the extra mile to communicate your story. Like, go to different meetups, find out who are the podcasters that are local, see what kind of stories that they're covering, listen to the stories, write them a review, ask them what they're looking to cover or how you can add to the conversation. There's there's so many local meetups. Find your interests. Like I love comedy, so I've gone to like 3 or 4 different comedy places. And then if I like one of the comedians, I'll reach out to them on social, or I'll stay after the show and say, what I liked about their set or what I liked about them and would they like to be on a podcast. You've got to get creative. But I would say start by seeing who's local, what meetups are happening in your area, who can who's got a studio even in town. One meetup that I went to at this Pod Houston event, it was co-sponsored by Sight and Sound. And the guy who was running Sight and Sound, when they introduced him as the sponsor, they said that he's always looking for voice talent, because he reads like manuals or different books for people that are blind. And I was like, oh, well, I love doing voice work and I love podcasting. And, I'd love to, potentially like use his studio sometimes. So what a great way to get in with that guy than to volunteer my time and maybe do some voice work. Also, I worked for a radio station for 9 months last year because I wanted to get back into radio. So it's like, if there are things that you want to be doing and ways in which you want to be seen, try those things. See how you can volunteer. See where you fit into what these places are already doing or these people are already doing.
Back to the initial T-shirt slogan. What are you missing, and where can I fit in?
Yeah.
That's it. And so a lot of folks want to be seen with minimal effort.
Yes.
It takes a strategic planning and approach. I'm telling you, if you think about events and where you can have some synergy in it, right? You will find ways where you can actually fill what they need with the talent you have.
I have another example of that. I went to a meetup on a Thursday. I was putting on my podcast event on a Monday, and I connected with a local videographer. He's like working for an ad agency in town, but he wants to get in with more realtors and he wants to do more camera work. And I was like, hey, I'm putting a podcaster meetup on. I'm going to have between 25 and 40 people there. Come if you want to be the videographer for that and take a couple behind the scenes shots. I'll credit you with all the video, and I'll kind of tell you the shots that I want, and I guarantee you're going to connect with other people at my event that could use your services. And sure enough, I had a guy show up and he's got his own agency and he's got 40 clients, and he was like, I could use somebody like you for 10 hours a week. That's the thing. You've got to think outside the box, and if you want to get creative, you have to connect with other creative people. I even wanted to like get back into music, and so I connected with podcasters who are also musicians, and I've now gotten myself on Spotify twice as a backup singer with Bruce Chamoff because he's been a musician for 30 years. And I was like, hey, if you ever need backup on one of your songs, and he was like, yeah, I know how to do auto tune, I know how to write the music. I play X, Y, and Z instruments. And he didn't even tell me what key to sing in or what harmony to sing. He just sent me the lyrics. He sent me the track. He let me be creative. And now we've collaborated twice. So again,
Amazing.
it's looking for people that are doing what you want to be doing and seeing how you can accompany that.
And Miriam says volunteering is a great way to get started to learn, grow, and recognize how your skills match the gaps. And that is truly, like I said, you brought it up. This is your statement. Where do you have a void? Where? And that's very intriguing. That is very interested versus interesting, right? You are interested in knowing what this person, this group, or this company may need. And then with your resume of all the things we've ever done in our life, a lot of people, oh, yeah, I'm not a carpenter by trade, right? I'm not certified, but I know how to drive a nail in the wood, right? So if you need somebody to drive a nail, whether it's through a gun or by hand, I could do it. And so all of a sudden, I'm finding myself in the carpentry world, right? So this is how you do it. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you, Miriam, for being with us on YouTube on that side. Now let's talk about heard, because everybody has a voice. Everybody has a voice, but not everyone is heard.
Yes.
That is, and sometimes those silent sufferers. I've been one in my lifetime, right? I've been one in my lifetime. And there is nothing more potent to your essence than your words. It is the only thing that you can't take back once you release.
Mm.
And so a lot of people have a hard time in getting heard, being out there. Maybe they're intimidated because they don't have the background to compose a bunch of words together without saying right? I was one at one time in front. I did meteorology, so I'm briefing the chart, and there's every couple of seconds, and they're like, "That ain't gonna work, bro." Right? So there's some talent behind being heard, but beyond the talent, or before the talent is ever, you have to find some type of confidence, and not only confidence in your voice, but confidence in yourself, that
Mhm.
when you speak, it is so valuable that people are already waiting to hear. I've been in places in this that we have been waiting to hear you speak. And I'm like, oh Lord, throw the pressure on a brother. Like, you've been waiting. Have you ever heard me before? So how do we get heard, especially when we have trouble uh, speaking, right? Um,
I recently had a girl reach out to me. Her name is Ray. She calls herself the interdisciplinarian. She has a podcast called Homeroomed or Homeroom. And yeah, she was raised by a single mom and didn't really have like extra resources for school. And now she's a mom and she kind of like really wants to invest in her own kids' education. And so her whole mission now is like interviewing people around education and how to do education differently, especially for like neurodivergent learners. And she reached out to me and she was like, "Hey, I just started this podcast and I'm still finding my footing as far as like finding my voice." She was like, "Would you ever let somebody guest host your podcast?" And I was like, I loved her whole approach to reaching out to me in such a sincere way. She's like, "You're a mom of 4 and you've done all of these episodes and I'm new and I'm still figuring out the interviewing thing." That she'd been doing a lot of solo episodes, but she hadn't really done any interviews. And I was like, I love that idea. And not too many people have approached me like that. So hell yeah. And she was so thoughtful in the questions, and she listened to multiple of my episodes beforehand, and she really I've now been on her podcast. She just recently interviewed me, and I'm deepening that connection. I love her content. I love her confidence and even how she reached out to me. It was so sincere. So people feel your sincerity. I think if you have an idea, go for it. Don't sleep on it. And as a mom of 4 and as a mompreneur, if I have an idea, I'm constantly like, my dad reached out to me the other day. He's like, "I think you should interview Scarlett Johansson about her AI copy twin." And I was like, "Yeah, dad, great idea." And so but I thought it was so funny that I posted that on Facebook and was like, "Yeah, my dad wants me to interview Scarlett Johansson about the AI copy bot." And so many people responded to that. Somebody literally private messaged me, here's her publicist, here's her manager, here's the email at CAA, try it. And I was like, you know what? Famous people they think about the same things we do. They get married, they have careers, they've lived a little bit of a different life, but they're just people. So it's like, if you have an idea, go for it. The way to get heard is to try it. And reach out to a podcaster and ask if you could guest host. Reach out to a podcast and see how you can add value to a conversation they've already had. And ask the people that you know and that are your cheerleaders, do they know any podcasters? Do they know any content creators? Do an Instagram live with somebody. You don't even have to start a podcast. There's so many platforms now. Start a LinkedIn live, start an Instagram live, do a Facebook live, practice with your friends, do a Zoom conversation and record it. That's a way to be heard.
I love it. A lot of times, it doesn't have to be all out.
Yeah, exactly.
Start where you are, right?
Start where
Like
you are.
with leaders, I tell them, lead where you are. Oh, I want to lead this, and I see it. Oh, well, are you leading where you are? Because
So
if you're
true.
not, You're not going to be leading, at least if I'm your supervisor, you're not going to be leading over there. Lead here, lead where you are and speak where you are. Let your voice be heard where you are. And you don't have to start big. We all did not start big. Go back to my very first episode and you'll see the difference between now and back then, because it's apparent, right? But that's how you get there, and you have to do it if you really want it, right? If you're just talking about it, that's something, and then that's okay too, right? But it's not going to go where you think it's going to go. Now, getting seen is one thing, getting heard is another. Oh my goodness, getting recognized. Now, I'm gonna caveat this getting recognized real quick with I will never be a I will never direct you or advise you to just to get recognized for the recognition. I'm not going to do that. Why? Because I know myself as a person that did that before. It's an empty space. Once you get it, that's it. There's nothing after. Um, and I'll tell you, right? I got this thing right here. It's special because it's probably the first one I've ever gotten. Um, Closest to the pin, right? Closest to the pin in a golf game. That ball actually went in the hole, hit the pin, and got popped out. It was this close to hole in one. Now,
Oh my God.
for golfers, you may know what that means. A huge disappointment. That's what it is. I could have had a hole in one. When you're always striving for a specific moment, and when that moment happens, it's over. This is the first time I'm looked at this closest to the pin since I got it, and it's sitting right in front of me. And this is why I'll never encourage you just to go after a moment or a specific recognition, and that's it. Build through that recognition and build after it. That's what I would suggest now that I know a little more. So, in getting recognized, everybody appreciates it, right? Everybody appreciates it. Especially if it comes sincerely, right? Somebody is really recognizing you for what you've done, and it feels good. There are pitfalls. There's great heights, right, and celebratory moments with recognition, but then there's also great pitfalls with recognition. So, in terms of getting recognized, obviously, there are good ways and not so good ways of doing it. What would you suggest for folks that are, getting seen and getting heard, but maybe not getting to that recognition stage of being invited or being asked to be here, or can you be a guest? How do you get there? What do you suggest for them that are looking to getting recognized?
I mean, some of my best opportunities have come from the relationships that I have. Um, I got a keynote opportunity because of somebody who I had actually met with in Chicago in person, and she was a keynote speaker and couldn't give the keynote. And since her and I had talked about doing a radio show together and we had specced out studios together and she had watched my whole journey, she put me in for it, which was amazing. And another time, there was a girl, Shiley, who was putting on like a LinkedIn coffee meetup. I think it was called like Lattes on LinkedIn or something. And she asked me to speak at it with another LinkedIn connection of hers. And I spoke at her event. And then she knew somebody that was a healthcare client and they were looking for somebody to produce the back end of their podcast. And that ended up being like a 3-year client for me. So, again, like you were saying, success is the road. Success is building these relationships, letting people know the work that you want to do, the work that excites you, and being a part of other people's wins, other people's events, other people's projects. And back to what we were talking about, like she wanted to do a radio show and we were talking about co-hosting it together. The other friend was looking for a speaker at her LinkedIn event. I volunteered to do that. Recently, I have volunteered to be a part of a media booth at 2 trade show conventions here because they have the high-end cameras and they have the mic set up and they have, the listenership. And I was new to town, so I volunteered to interview any of their people so that I could use their equipment and their setup. And it was a win-win situation. So look for win-wins, look for partnerships. Other ways that I've gotten recognition is I've reached out to tools that I actually use, like Riverside. I used with that client for 3 years, and I reached out to them, and they've also reached out to me, and I said, "Hey, like, how do you partner with creators who love your technology?" And they were like, "Would you ever put on a meetup?" It was actually their idea, and I was like, "Yeah." So they helped me create the graphics. They helped me market it to the people that they knew in Houston. And then I created a video, like, with the people who attended the event, and I said, "Hey, what would you like to say to Riverside? That you learned about podcasting, that you love their tool, anything you'd like to improve about it?" And then I cut together that video and gave it to Riverside as a thank you. And now I'm gonna plan a second one, maybe next quarter. So it's, continuing to try again. If you have a win, how can you do it better? I also reached out to the Headliner app and was like, "Hey, Riverside sent me some swag. You guys aren't competitors. I love both of your products. Would you want to be on the next one?" And then they sent me a box of stuff. And then notice who are the sponsors at other events that you're attending and how can you connect with them and what kind of events do they want to sponsor and how do they want to be recognized? And sometimes when you help other people get recognized, you get recognized alongside them. And I've done a lot of that.
And I absolutely love that. That has been, without a doubt, one of the reasons why, my particular shows have had the support. I'll do whatever, you know. I was StreamYard, right? StreamYard. You said Riverside. I use StreamYard. For the last 4 years I've been trying to get a duck and a pillow. I wasn't trying to get
With
nothing
Rob
else.
Greenlee. Hey, shout out Rob Greenlee.
Right, exactly.
Mr. Quackers.
And so, just all I wanted was a duck and a pillow. And 4 years. It took 4 years.
You got a duck?
Yeah, I got a duck. Look, check it out.
Oh, cute.
So the duck is here, the pillow is here, and on top of that, I said, "Hey," kind of like what you did.
Yeah.
I noticed that you guys, I haven't seen any videos from the people that use your products. Do you have a process for that?
Bingo.
I'd be willing to do a video about my experience with you guys, and and I'll do it. I don't mind. That turned into a conversation that went to the recording of the video, that went into a case study being done. They used me as a case study.
Bingo.
And then
yes,
I not only did I get the pillow and the duck, they sent me a box of stuff, right? And then they partnered with me. And so now all of my DTLW episodes are there of the partner. And I mentioned them. And that's how you do it, folks. Recognition is great for you. But it's better when it's shared with somebody else. And I tell you that I love the platforms that I use. I love the relationships that I've been able to garner throughout these years and grow. And it's not just something that I've seen for myself. I see it with you. I mean, every time I see you doing something, it's always in support of somebody else. And at the same time, you're getting supported back. And so that's the beauty of what we do, right? And so we have spoken about getting seen, getting heard, and getting recognized. And Reena, you have been such a wonderful guest to share your experiences and how all that works together for you. and how it can work together for someone else. And if someone wanted to now collaborate with you, seek your advice, maybe have you on their show, hey, maybe have you to be the face of their product, how would they do that? And where do you want them to go?
Thank you so much. Yeah, you can find me on pretty much all social media at Reena Friedman Watts, or you can go to bettercalldaddy.com.
and and we will make sure to get all those links particular to you in the comment section, or either way we can, so that folks can get a hold of you. But Reena, thank you so much for spending this last hour with me. I know over in the Texas side has been a little weather weather has been crazy,
It
both
has.
in Houston and Dallas. Dallas
Wow.
with the wind and all that, and then Houston with all the rain and flooding and tornadoes. Good Lord, we've been praying for them intently. But thank you so much for sharing this time with me. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your collaborations throughout the years. Thank you so much for being you. And there's a lot of love and aloha sent from our end here in Orlando to you in Texas.
Aw, you're the best. Thank you so much. I loved
Well,
being here with
folks,
you.
I tell you that these times they fly by. And so we're going to bid aloha and mahalo to everybody. What I want to do is ensure that you know that DTLW is in the hunt for 700 subscribers. We are about 650 something. If you can help us, that would be a way to collaborate with me. I would also collaborate with you, because what happens at 700 is that I give away an author-signed leadership book. One of my guests on the show has donated that book, and this pile is about this high already. So I'm trying to dish these out. So, hey, there you go. If you don't
Hey,
know, you better ask Rena, because she got one of the
hey,
last books.
hey.
So every time we get to 100, the next milestone, we give one away. So if you can do so and be so kind, go on to DTLW, and you can get it at DTLW Podcast on YouTube and sign up, and I'll get a notification you're in the running for the next book. I also want to give some props for Parade Deck for hosting us and live streaming us at the same time with all the other platforms. So thank you, Parade Deck, for hosting us. Parade Deck is a military veteran, military spouse, and first responder streaming platform, and they have all types of creators on there. I know that some are not, but you can look them up, paradedeck.com, and you can follow me directly at 731, and I would appreciate that. Folks, thank you so much for being with us today. Mahalo. Have a very safe and blessed weekend, and we'll see you next week. Reena, much love.
Thank you.